PaulHarrell.com.
Now back to the program. Second week in a row, we have the president of the Family Council Action. Mr. Jerry Cox is with us. Jerry, welcome back, sir.
Well, it's always a pleasure.
Yes, sir. It's always great to have you on. And listen, I know your scorecard. I mean, I've gone over it since we last talked that you came out with. Really, really good. And I also know that there's probably some folks that may not be too happy about where they are on the scorecard. And so I just wanted to have you on and just kind of see if there has been any fallout or criticism directed at your organization.
Yes, quite a bit. I actually did not anticipate people being as angry with us as they have been just because we published how they voted. And we gave them a grade based on whether they voted with us or not. And, boy, I tell you what, it lit them up. And it's just like, back when I was a high school history teacher, the people that made good grades, man, they loved it. It was a great report card. They were happy. And the ones that didn't get as good a grade as they thought they should have gotten, then they start finger pointing. It's like, this is a dumb evaluation, or you got it in for me. You're just trying to mess me up, or whatever. And the truth is, we have no vested interest in giving anybody a bad grade. In fact, just like being a teacher in a classroom, you'd celebrate if everybody made a good grade. If everybody made an A, you'd be happy. And the truth is, a lot of people made really good scores, and some didn't get as good a scores as they thought. And others looked over at some other guy and said, well, I'm more conservative than he is. How did he get a better grade than I did? Well, the truth is, he must have voted better. And that's the stark reality.
Mm. Yeah, and I mean, your organization, the Family Council Action, I mean, you guys have been doing this. I said this, I guess, on Friday. For 30 years, you have been, you've kind of known what your convictions are, Jerry, personally, for a long time, and I'm sure that shapes the agenda of the Family Council. Is that right?
Well, of course, we've always been pro-life. We have always been in favor of education reform. We've always been in favor of traditional marriage and, these other family core issues. And, of course, there are issues that connect with that, like the whole marijuana issue and how it impacts children and families. The expansion of alcohol, even, it affects children and families. And certainly how we treat people who are residents of our nursing homes, and some of the lawsuit reform, so-called reform measures that are out there. So these family issues go in a number of directions. We go where the battle is. And people say, well, why are you over there? Because that's where the battle is. That's where the threat is. And so we're there. And so we go to the legislature knowing exactly where we stand on these issues. And, we've evaluated lawmakers as far as publishing their votes for 2 or 3 sessions now, but this is the first time we ever put a grade on there. And there were 25 bills in the House, 25 in the Senate. You get 4 points for each good vote. 4 times 25 is 100. 90 to 100 is an A. Anything below 60 is an F. And we had people make all kinds of grades. And we put them up there the way they earned them. And I tell people over and over, I said, this is not my grade. This is their grade. I didn't vote. This is how they voted. And this is how they voted on the things that are important to us. May not be important to them. Might not be important to some other group. But this is how they voted on things that were important to us.
Yeah.
People can look at that and make whatever decision they want to make about it.
Oh yeah, and it's pretty. That's really a great point. And yet they're getting bent out of shape. I think they're getting bent out of shape. Feel free to respond or to this any way you want. So you mentioned some issues there: expansion of alcohol, marijuana. These are things that are important to you. But also, the Family Council has been known, like you said, you've always been pro-life, and that's been something that I think a lot of people agree on, or at least they say they agree on. It seems to me there are some people, though, that just wish you would kind of abandon some of those issues that are important to you so that their scores would have gone up. You know?
Well, yes. But didn't we all in school at times say, man, I wish I hadn't had to take that test. I wish we hadn't had to do that chapter. That was hard. Being a lawmaker is not easy, and you have to make hard decisions. You have to make hard votes. That's why you got elected. And so, yes, I feel their pain, as some people might say, but at the same time, we all have to step up and do our jobs. Mm-hmm. And
the maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing, and it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program today. Thank you so much for being with us. As always, my name is Paul, and you have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine, and one of the ways you can help us out, you can contribute, is to call us or text us 870-275-9799. Last week, I promised that this segment was going to happen. We have, and we're privileged to have on the phone, we have Dr. Jeremy Horpendahl, who is an assistant professor of economics at the University of Central Arkansas and an Arkansas Center for Research and Economics scholar on the line. Dr. Horpendahl, welcome to the program, sir.
Thanks, Paul. We're glad to be here.
And then we also have Mr. Jacob Bundrick, who is a policy analyst with the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, also at UCA. Jacob, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Paul. Always glad to be on.
Absolutely. Now, the reason, and I've been looking forward to this all week, because you guys authored together a policy paper on Arkansas's spending habits, and it really takes a long view of this. And I'll tell you, we have been talking about Arkansas's out-of-control spending habits for a long time now. And so this paper really, showed up on my radar. And it's tell us a little bit about the Mercatus Center over at George Mason University and how this paper is affiliated with that institution.
Yeah, sure, Paul. This is Jeremy Horpendahl. The Mercatus Center at George Mason is, in some ways, it's like ACRE. It's a university-based research center, but they're much bigger than ACRE, and they cover both federal and policy issues in all the states. When I was a graduate student at George Mason University, I was a fellow there when I was writing my dissertation, so I've had a long relationship with them going back about 10 years. So this is a paper that they asked us, or we kind of talked about doing. They've done a few of these reports for other states, and they thought Arkansas might be really interesting. And so they said, you'd be a perfect one to do this. And, I just got to Arkansas. This was about 2 years ago. We started working on this. And Jacob had a lot of the knowledge, since he's a native Arkansan, of things going on here. So that's how it relates to, this is a Mercatus product, even though we're both at ACRE.
Yeah.
But, we all kind of change hats now and then.
Yeah, and Jacob, he mentioned you are a native Arkansan, and we're going to get to the specifics of this paper here in just a minute, because I've got some questions. But, I mean, was there anything shocking to you that you didn't know about the spending? I'm going to describe it throughout this interview as a spending problem, because I think we're spending too much money. Did anything shock you, Jacob?
Well, I mean, growing up in Arkansas, you kind of get used to the status quo that we've had here. But anytime you take a really thorough look into anything, really, particularly something as expansive as Arkansas state spending, you're always going to find something that you really didn't know about. So through the course of working on this paper, I think that I found several things that I don't know if they were, I term them as shocking necessarily, but things that I wasn't aware of beforehand. So I learned a lot in the process of going through the history of Arkansas spending.
Let's just dive right in, and you guys feel free to take whichever question you feel comfortable with, or if you both want to answer it, that's fine as well. For example, I'm going to just quote a few lines of the report. So on page 6. The high level of spending in Arkansas is especially concerning because Arkansas is a very low-income state. Using most measures of income, Arkansas is regularly ranked as one of the 3 poorest states. So do these data points show us that even though Arkansas has continued to grow government spending year after year, it's done little to alleviate poverty and stagnant income, and might actually be hurting Arkansans from seeing economic growth? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of research to show, a relationship between, or negative relationship between government spending generally and tax levels and how state incomes grow. Right? Arkansas has been a low-income state for a long time, and we can just bemoan that if we want, but I think we should look at how do you make Arkansas wealthier and richer. And large government spending levels and high tax levels are shown in the research to lower rates of economic growth, which means over time we're just going to stay behind if we continue with the same sorts of policies. So yeah, there's we're low and very low income state, in bottom 3 in most categories as you said. That means that for us to spend this much, it's a very high percentage of people's income. And I should also say that even if you take out federal transfer money, if you take that out, we're still at the top among our neighboring states. You can take all that out. Even of our own money, we still spend the most. We've got a table in the paper on that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also means that this is not the way that you get out of poverty. Right? Government spending, high levels of taxes are not the solution to poverty. In many ways, they're one cause of it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, my question is, in terms of the amount of spending that has grown since, you guys charted this from 1951 all the way to 2013, and you've got an interesting statistic here. In 1951, we spent, listen to this, folks, $770 per person to run government. Now we're spending $6,791 per person, and I want to be clear, that is adjusted to inflation. So that is in 2013 dollars when you look going from $770 per person in 1951 to almost $7,000 in 2013. So this growth in spending, and then you have one of the most poor states. Is it possible that the reason we have stagnant wages, stagnant household income, is because too much of our money's going to the government?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. I mean, if you look at that era, before 1950 and into the 1960s, Arkansas actually had a lot of great entrepreneurship going on before then. We still have some today. We had a lot. So if you look at our, we have now 5 or 6 Fortune 500 companies, changes every year. But of those, all of them were founded in 1962 or earlier. So we have a lot of Fortune 500 companies based here, but they're all very old companies. So we've had a lot of government growth recently and haven't had really any entrepreneurship to show for it in terms of new big companies. Walmart, our biggest company in the world, they're the newest of all our Fortune 500 companies, and they're a pretty old company.
Wow. Yeah, I've actually never thought of that. That's so it definitely shows that we've got really just a lot of work to do. On page 12,
I think it also shows that
go
we
ahead.
do have the potential, right? And there's a lot of good, hardworking people here, a lot of good ideas. It's just being stifled for some reason in recent decades, and I think the large burden of government is is at least, the major thing, if not the only thing that's driving that.
Mm-hmm. You guys talked about something in your paper that we haven't talked about a lot on this program, and I don't really hear a lot of politicians ever talk about it very much. And that's Arkansas's unfunded liabilities. I think it was page 12. You got a figure that equates unfunded liabilities or off-balance sheet government debt, more than $20 billion for the state. And I know you guys had a lot of ideas at the end of the paper about reform. So what reform, when it comes to our unfunded liabilities, do we need to see to address $20 billion debt? I mean, you specifically mentioned shifting from defined benefit plans to defined contribution plans. Can you explain that? What does that even mean to the audience? What does that mean?
Sure. So we got into this issue because one of the main big areas of spending growth over the past 2 decades has been public pensions. That's kind of exploded in the past few years, and it's going to keep growing. So we were starting to think about, well, how do you limit that? And the most basic way is you stop letting new people get into the pension system and put them on some other plans. So traditional pensions are what are called defined benefit plans. So your benefit is defined, by law if it's a public pension or by contract if it's a private pension. And you just know when I retire, I'm going to get this much of whatever my income was, whether it's your best 10 years or there's all different formulas. It's defined what your benefit is. But, depending on how long you live, this can be a huge liability for, especially now we're talking about public pensions for the state. If you have, a generous or even a small pension, if you live a long time, which people do now, these pensions can be very expensive for the state, and they often aren't putting away enough money to, according to the accounting of this, for it to be there. There's not enough money put away, which means it's going to have to come out of higher taxes in the future. What we suggest moving to are what are called defined contribution plans, which are very common in the private sector. 401ks are the most popular, so that'd be the most popular type of defined contribution. But even in the nonprofit sector, they have something called a 403b. At UCA, I'm part of TIAA, which is a defined contribution plan for people that work at universities. UCA even, and most Arkansas universities have done this. Last year, we said no one knew it. UCA can move into the pension system, the state pension system. Before, you used to have the option. You can go into this defined contribution where the money's in your account, or you can have a traditional pension. UCA doesn't allow that anymore, and that's what most universities have moved away from. But for most state employees, that's still what they're in, is this pension system, which is great for them, but it's going to be very expensive for future taxpayers.
Wow. And I saw, you guys have one chart, and we've showed it on the program before. I mean, it really shows breaks down the amount of spending increases, from 1951 to 2013. And it's certainly, you've got Medicaid in there, you've got education in there, and you have these pensions in there as well. And, this is something, again, that doesn't get a lot of attention. But, I mean, in the right economic downturn, I mean, this could get really serious really quickly, correct?
Yeah, and especially because the pensions are really the hardest thing to cut. If things got really bad with the budget, we could say, we're going to get rid of Arkansas Works. Like, you could just do that, and you're essentially going back to what it was 5 years ago, right? But with people's pensions that are retired, it's almost impossible to cut those. So that's kind of like the last thing you would ever cut. Mm-hmm. But that means that they put an enormous strain on the budget when they get so big in terms of this, $20 billion unfunded liability. That becomes a real challenge of how you would fund those if the state kind of runs out of other people's money. Yeah.
We're gonna take a quick break. We've got Mr. Jacob Bundrick and Dr. Jeremy Horpedal with us for the next hour until we get to 5 o'clock. So we've got a lot more to get to. I want to talk about how Arkansas does stack up against other states, because a lot of people, guys, they might be out there thinking, this is every state. Every state has seen this growth in government, and you guys have statistics, according to this report, that show that, no, we're in a unique situation here. I mean, we're a big government state, and we need a lot of reform. So you guys hang on the line. Folks, we're going to take a break. The Liberty Machine rolls on back here in just a moment. Arkansas small businesses are tired of taxes that are too high and regulations that work as obstacles to small business success. If you own a small business, it's time to take action. Now, I'm not talking about the local chambers of commerce. I'm talking about an organization that's actually run by small business owners and are fighting for small businesses right here in the state of Arkansas. They're called Conduit for Action, and they're on your side. Conduit for Action is here not to get something from the government, but to be left alone by the government. Think of them as your personal advocate for limited government at the Capitol in Little Rock. If you're tired of all the politicians talking with no results and ready for action, start outsourcing your government affair needs with Conduit for Action. Go now to conduitforaction.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforaction.org and stand up for small business in Arkansas. Do you need to advertise your business product or service, but not sure what the best choice is? Folks, allow me to introduce you to talk radio. You're listening to it right now. Talk radio is one of the most unique mediums in all of advertising because it actually works. It gets the information you want to the people you want to get it to. And by the way, those people are educated, well-informed decision makers of their household, and most of them have disposable income. If this is a target audience for your business, then you have to consider advertising on my show, The Paul Harrell Program. We have options for most any budget and can provide you with exciting opportunities to grow your business. We can put your message across the state, or we can help you locally. Call 870-275-9755 if you have any questions. That's 870-275-9755, or visit my website, paulharrell.com, and click on Advertise.
Paul Harrell, your voice for limited government and small business in Arkansas.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We have with us on the line, we've got Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl. He is a Arkansas Center for Research and Economics scholar, also assistant professor in economics at the University of Central Arkansas, and also Jacob Bundrick, the policy analyst from ACRE. Welcome back, guys. So glad that you could take the time to talk to us about this incredible paper on Arkansas spending.
Yes, sir. We're happy to be here talking about it.
We appreciate all the attention you give in this paper. We didn't expect this. This is great. We love it.
Well, I mean, it's really valuable stuff. I've been trying to tell people, look, we've got a spending problem here in Arkansas. Some of our politicians call it a revenue problem, but specifically, let's put into perspective. Can you guys help me put into perspective how different Arkansas is compared to other comparable states? You've got some of those comparable states, Virginia, Alabama, North Carolina, but then, of course, our border states, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Mississippi, Tennessee, Missouri, Texas. Talk a little bit about the spending habits of Arkansas compared to those states.
Sure, just in broad terms, and we're here, we focus mostly on state spending. We mostly ignore the local spending, except when you get to education, because it's really important there. But when you look at just state spending, Arkansas spends, this is from 2014, actually I have the latest numbers, the latest ones we could find. From 2015, Arkansas spends almost $8,000 per person, $7,991. $8,000 per person at the state level. For what we call the competitor states, which is 12 other states that are in our region or bordering us, they spend a little under $5,000, so about $4,915. So about $8,000 per person in Arkansas versus about $5,000 on average in these other 12 states. And it's not like there's even one that stands out. The next highest one is Mississippi at just a little over $6,000. So we're at about $8,000 per person. Mississippi's at about $6,000. They're the second highest. Then after that, you get to, Louisiana and Oklahoma are kind of right there with Mississippi. But you get down to the Carolinas, they're at about 4,500. So we're at about 8,000. They're at about 4,500. And then you get even down into Missouri and Florida, and they're under $4,000 per person, so half of us. Now, part of that, I should say, is because we have a much more centralized government spending system in Arkansas. A lot less is done locally, and what is done locally with property taxes mostly flows through the state treasury anyway. Some of those other states like Missouri just do it in a more decentralized, localized way. But we think that's something we should be concerned with too, that there are some problems with centralization, not just, Washington, D.C. centralization, but even centralization within Arkansas. We think that's an issue. But yeah, so we're much higher than any other state that's near us when you look at it.
Yeah.
State-level spending per person.
And talk about table number 3 in your report as well, where it is the per-person state spending as a percentage of per capita income. Kind of break that down for us, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah. So this is taking kind of that same number, but then dividing it through by how much income do people have, right? This is essentially saying how much of your income is going to pay for government services. At the state level, Arkansas, about 33.5%, so about a third of your income. For all the others, the average is about 19%. So we're at 33%. It's 19% on average for these other 12 states that we looked at. Again, Mississippi is the next closest there at about 29.5. So we're at 33.5. It's 19% of people's income. In other states, take out federal money, it doesn't make much difference. Take out federal money, so just our own money, 24% of personal income. In Arkansas, average 12.5% for these other 12 states. So we're about twice as much if you look at it that way.
Gosh.
So just a lot more.
Yeah.
And again, some of that's because we're more centralized, but I don't think we can just brush it off by saying that. That's an important thing to know.
Yeah. Yeah, you're exactly. The word centralization. I mean, that doesn't. That's not a good thing in my mind. When we're talking about government, that's not something that I want to hear. Yeah, Arkansas is more centralized than the other states around us. That's like that means less local controls. Is what I hear of when I think that, or think of when I hear that.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is true for a lot of different types of spending, roads, prisons, but it's especially true for education. Jacob's done a lot of research on this. I don't know, Jacob, if you want to talk about how that centralization in education works, just quickly, and maybe let's follow up.
Yeah. So education is a big piece of Arkansas's budget, and it's grown pretty dramatically since 1992. And as a lot of people from Arkansas probably know, that has a lot to do with the Lakeview court case. And what that basically was is back in 1992, the state Supreme Court said that the state system of financing the public education system was unconstitutional. So the legislature went in and they developed two plans over the course of this court case. The first one was the Equitable School Finance Plan. And basically what that did was pool state and local resources to divide among the school districts in the state. But one of the big things that happened as a part of that was that Amendment 74 was passed. And Amendment 74 set the minimum property tax at 25 mils. Mm-hmm. The other big thing that the plan did was ensure that the state's poorest districts got at least 80% of the per-student funding that the state's 95th percentile district received. So the idea behind that was to get equitable funding across these school districts. So originally, that plan appeased the state Supreme Court, but it was again challenged in the early 2000s, and it was declared unconstitutional again. And the state Supreme Court issued about 10 reasons for why that was. I won't get into all those reasons, but it was things along the lines of, we had abysmal benchmark scores, there was disparities in teacher salaries. So the legislature meets again, and with the help of some consultants, develop a per-student funding matrix. Mm-hmm. And the way that this matrix works is it's a bunch of line items of things deemed necessary to provide an adequate education for each student, right? So things like school teachers, supplies, administration,
Jacob,
all these different costs.
Let's hold that right there. Hold that right there. We're up against a hard break. We'll be right back with Jacob Bundrick. He's going to finish up on this massive growth in education spending that we've seen when you look at this paper. Great paper, and we'll give you more information when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Part of my job is to help local people out here understand how their lawmakers are doing. When I travel the state, one of the first questions that people ask me when I walk into a church meeting or whatever it is, they ask, well, how's my guy doing? How's our people doing that we elected? And they really want to know. And, up until now, I've had to say, well, pretty good. I think they're doing all right. But now I have a report card, and I can say, well, here's how they voted on the issues that were important to us.
Yeah.
You tell me how you think they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's as objective as it can possibly be because it's just how they voted. It's not how pretty they are or how good a friend they are or how much they may have helped us. And some of this I'm kind of looking at, well, could we do it better next time? For example, State Representative Mark Lowry, good friend of mine, sponsored 5 good homeschool bills and got them all passed. Well, he got credit for how he voted on those, just like everybody else did, but he didn't get any extra credit because he sponsored the bills.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I had a state representative that sponsored a bill for us. He probably should have had points taken off, Paul, because he did such a poor job. Never ran the bill, never even tried. And so a lot of that becomes subjective there.
Is this one of those guys that had to check with the governor first and then kind of abandoned the effort?
I'm afraid he checked with the governor was his problem.
Yeah. Oh man, it's just you just keep, and that's one of the reasons I love how honest you are about how that is what has been going on. You mentioned earlier, some of the criticism that you've received maybe because one politician knows that he's way more conservative than maybe another politician who had got a higher score than he is. And I just want to reiterate, there are some folks down there who are big talkers. And, I don't mind you being a big talker. I talk for a living. But, it's not just about, wearing your social values on your sleeve and being outspoken. Again, this is actually how you voted. And so that's, I think, in some degree, this scorecard is maybe a mirror, and these legislators don't like the reflection that they're seeing. Well,
it's a little bit like a football game. Some people talk big and they play big. They can make the plays. Other people talk big and then they get on the field is like, well, you're kind of average, And just because you talk big doesn't mean that you're always going to be able to measure up to, an A standard or top of the line or whatever. And so a lot of people will very quickly tell you, oh, I'm the most conservative guy in the legislature. I'm the most conservative gal in the House of Representatives, whatever. And maybe they are. But let's look at how you voted and let's just see, if you really are or not.
Yeah.
And, I'm quick to point out, this is not the only way to evaluate a lawmaker. Any evaluation is going to be flawed. It's going to fall short. There are probably 4 or 5 scorecards out there right now. They all, including ours, fall in some measure short of telling everybody what all they need to know about a particular lawmaker.
Mm-hmm. But
it's an important tool for people to have.
Yeah.
That they can look at that and put that with.
Your values, your ideals. The Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Also, welcome back to the program, Dr. Jeremy Horpedal. He's an Acre Scholar, that stands for Arkansas Center for Research and Economics, Assistant Professor of Economics at UCA. Also, Jacob Bundrick, Policy Analyst from Acre, and Jacob was just going over a little bit of why Arkansas spending is out of control, and it has grown so much. And you're talking about the Lakeview court case and what happened with all of that. And so, Jacob, I mean, in your opinion, feel free to summarize. But I mean, did that have a huge impact on the amount of growth in government and the budget over the time period that you guys surveyed?
Oh, yes, sir. It had a tremendous impact. So in 1992, when the Lakeview court case started, Arkansas spent about $2.9 billion on public education. And by 2013, we were spending just over $5 billion. So if you adjust that for population, so put that in per capita terms, we saw about a 41.6% increase in education funding over that time span.
Wow. Yeah, you know, and you know, I'd love to ask the question. I mean, don't know if you guys know the answer, but I'd love to ask the question, you know, what's the benefit ratio there? You know what I mean? Like, of course, if you were to ever question that, and I know we have a court case involved, but if you were to question that, and then, you know, the rhetoric can start, you're against the kids and you're against education. And of course, that's not the case. We just want, you know, responsible spending.
Right. Yeah, and that's something that's very important to look at when it comes to education spending, because we all want great educational outcomes. It has lots of benefits to the economy if we have educated people living here. The problem is that we haven't really seen the growth in educational outcomes that's kept pace with the amount of growth in spending on education. We've done a little bit of research on K through 12 education in terms of school choice, but a lot of our data on that has come from a group up at the University of Arkansas who studied that a little bit more intensely than we have.
Mm-hmm. I want to shift gears, and I want to talk about our tax policy. Tim Griffin penned a letter to the task force on tax reform, and he said that in order to really do this right, they have to tackle spending. Your report confirms that those ideas that Lieutenant Governor sent to the task force. On page 16, regarding the Revenue Stabilization Act, quote, to state it another way, the level of government spending in Arkansas, this is from your paper, is directly determined by the tax system. Taxes are the tail that wags the dog in Arkansas budgeting. So if taxes are raised, government spending is guaranteed to go up. If taxes are cut, spending is guaranteed to go down. End quote. That's from your paper. So if we just cut taxes, we'll have no choice but to cut spending. So is this why we see revenue neutral attempts at tax cuts, which aren't really tax cuts, because it would force Arkansas to cut spending?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And, you know, this Revenue Stabilization Act, I hope we get a chance to talk about it a bit more. I think it's actually a really important part of the story here. But, yeah, I mean, that's based on how our budgeting works, that if the tax revenue isn't there, spending has to be cut. And there's each year the legislature sets out a priority list. They got categories they rank things in. And so it's known which things will be cut. So, yeah, that's part of why, you know, revenue neutral reform is kind of the order of the day. I actually wrote another book on tax reform. It came out last November, called Arkansas: The Roadmap to Tax Reform, which you can get from our website too. Our website is uca.edu/ACRE. And this report we're talking about and the tax reform book are up there. But yeah, we looked at a lot into the Arkansas tax system. We think there are a lot of things you could do that are revenue neutral. But big tax cuts are one of the ways you could, in the long run, bring down government spending in Arkansas. Well,
yeah, I mean, it's to me that's what makes Arkansas, and I believe you referenced this briefly in your report. That's what makes Arkansas very unique in this case, because the taxes, from what I got from your report, the taxes directly impact the spending. And so, you know, if taxes go up, it gets spent. Another part of your report, quote, this dynamic of the Revenue Stabilization Act, the assurance that all funds are spent, and the Revenue Stabilization Act is touted by Arkansas politicians as something that makes sure we have a balanced budget. But now, and we interviewed State Representative Jeff Williams, and he brought this to our attention, me for the first time, but maybe he had read your report. The assurance that all funds are spent also has an important underlying budget feature. It means that the tax system itself is crucially important for determining the level of government spending. So, other states may have, kind of a less direct way or an indirect way of the two, affecting one another. Arkansas, much more close, right? I mean, the taxes and spending go hand in hand, correct?
Yeah, that's right. And, almost every state has some sort of constitutional requirement to balance their budget, but not in the hard way that we do here. In most other states, they kind of do it in an ad hoc way. If the revenue isn't there, then they got to figure out, what are we going to cut? But in Arkansas, we say in advance, if the revenue is not here, here are the first things we cut. And yeah, as you were saying, it almost guarantees that all the money will be spent. Now, in a couple of the past fiscal years, there's been a small surplus they put in what they call a rainy day fund. Although Arkansas is a very tiny rainy day fund compared to any other state, because we have this Revenue Stabilization Act. They did use some of the surplus 2 years ago for the middle income class tax cut in 2015, but those are kind of the unusual years. If you go back throughout, most of the past, say, 35 years, and we've got the data on it for the Revenue Stabilization Act, all the money just gets spent. And if there's more money, they kind of go down the list. They've got these A, B, and C groups. And the C group they usually called sometimes the wish list. It's kind of low-value programs that are just kind of put in there as, yeah, sure, we'll put these on the list. But then if there's extra tax revenue, those kind of low-value programs get funded anyway. So there's a smart part to it, which it prevents us from going into debt and going bankrupt. But it's got this dark side, which is that if there's additional revenue because the economy is doing well or because they raise tax rates, that money just gets spent. It go back to taxpayers, doesn't usually get saved. And despite what's happened in the last couple of sessions, we think it'd be good to make that a permanent feature of our budgeting process, that money either gets refunded to the taxpayers or gets used to pay for tax cuts.
And I want to continue that in a minute, but you guys also talked about the Arkansas bankruptcy that happened in the 30s. Thought that was really good because it brings up a context. You hope we learn our lesson from that. But did this Revenue Stabilization Act, here's another quote, I believe, is this page 12. In context of the state of Arkansas defaulting on its debt previously, you say the primary reason for the accumulation of debt by the state of Arkansas was the assumption of municipal debts. And so let's just kind of take that into consideration when we consider that recently in 2016, Issue 3 was passed, and it will allow further expansion of cities and counties to issue bonds and debt for so-called economic development projects. Does this put Arkansas on the path to repeating history 100 years later?
I think the bigger thing there is that you remove the cap on the state's ability to issue debt. It was billed under bringing jobs and businesses here that we needed to be able to do it for economic development purposes, but it's right down that history of the default back in the 30s. Some of the constitutional restrictions that we had between the 30s and Issue 3 were put there because of the default. And so in some sense, yes, we have forgotten our history. And, it's possible that this legislature or the next legislature is responsible enough not to put Arkansas in that situation, but you've opened the door to allowing that if there's a legislature that's not as responsible. So it's possible, and our history has shown us that we've done it before. So it's hard to rule that out.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't think that human nature certainly hasn't changed since the 30s. It's pretty interesting, and I hope we don't repeat history. But we do have modern day examples, Puerto Rico, things like that, where you can just over leverage the state, and we don't want to get there. on page 26, okay, here's a quote. In calendar year 2013 alone, tax incentive. I really want to move into tax incentives, okay? I love that you guys spent a little time in this paper talking about how much money of the tax, how much spending is driven by giving away money to companies. So tax incentives and subsidies, corporate welfare. You say it costs the state of Arkansas more than $218 million, or nearly $74 per person. Does that mean that each Arkansas taxpayer is forced to pay $74 a year in taxes to subsidize corporations? Is that what those figures mean?
Essentially, yes. So it's two-part. One is the actual issuance of subsidies, right? So that is physically giving taxpayer dollars to a company in the hopes that they promote economic development in the state. The other part of that is tax expenditures. So what tax expenditures are, for those of you that aren't familiar with that, is things like tax breaks, tax rebates, lower tax rates for individual companies. They're favors to these companies. So those don't necessarily mean that we're spending more dollars, but it's revenue that we're foregoing, right? It's revenue that we would have, in most cases, otherwise collected. So we include it in our analysis of spending.
Okay. I want to. This is just great. I mean, you guys have really done a ton of work here. Folks, if you want to get a copy of this report, it's uca.edu/ACRE. Okay, it's a lot of acronyms there, but it's uca.edu/ACRE, and you can get this paper on government spending. I think it's something that we need to be made aware of. I also want to hear your reform ideas, and I want to talk about that when we come back from break. So are you guys still good to hang on through another segment?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Folks, before we go to break, though, I want to talk to you a little bit about iText. They are the text to trust. Business owners, it could happen to you. We've got cyber warfare going on. You've got ransomware going on, and I'm just going to say, don't let it happen to you. You need to protect your business. And iText knows protecting your business is protecting your data, which is protecting your bottom line. So ask yourself, are you really prepared to handle the growing threat of cyber criminals and ransomware? At iText, they are committed to helping you to deploy the best security solutions to protect your business and your bottom line. Because security threats are constantly evolving, you need a managed IT service provider. So be proactive now and equip your business with the best cybersecurity available with iText. Call them today. Free consultation. It costs you nothing, but you don't want to be, you want to be proactive. You don't want to be like, hey, what's a Bitcoin? How do I buy Bitcoin so I can get my data back? You don't want to be in that situation. Call iText today, 870-336-9778. That's 870-336-9778 or itextusa.com. Back in just a moment.
Good morning. Good morning. Congratulations, you have made it to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, where we strive to offer politicians the very best in ambiguously specific language, the purpose of which is to allow our politician bosses to grow government and keep their constituents in the dark. This yields two beneficial outcomes. First, the government-growing politicians stay in office, and second, we at the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language get to remain in the shadows and get to keep our jobs. Now, it's time for technocrat training drills. Johnny?
Yes?
A politician wants to use the healthcare system to punish those who have and redistribute their wealth. What is the appropriate language to use in this situation to make an unpopular idea acceptable to the public?
I would emphasize that these ideas would make their healthcare more affordable and make sure the public understands if they already have adequate healthcare, nothing will change for them.
Very good, Johnny. Much progress since last time. Next up, let's have Susie. Susie, your politician has been caught in, dare I say it, a lie.
What kind of a lie?
It doesn't really matter, but in the spirit of the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language, I will give you a good hypothetical scenario. Dozens of politicians have been thrown out of office for supporting a socialist healthcare program. So the remaining politicians get together and they pass a bill to, quote, end the program, end quote. But they really want to keep it. What should they do, Susie?
May I ask a question for more information?
Certainly.
Has the word lie been used by the political opposition?
Yes.
I know. They should change the name of the program. Maybe use the word works to make the sheeple think it's for working folk. Then they should go on the attack and get the public distracted. I would advise the politician to publicly question why our political dialogue has become so uncivilized and tell them to claim using the word lie, no matter how accurate, is a personal attack on his or her character. And if they admit to any wrongdoing at all, they must replace the word lie with words like misspoke, misstatement, misrepresent, or mislead.
Amazing! Excellent work, Susie. I feel like the student has really become the teacher. You will make a terrific addition to the Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language.
All hands on deck. This is a Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language emergency. Several politicians are scrambling after being exposed by some talk radio host. Let's move it, people. They need our help.
The Bureau of Carefully Crafted Language. You vote 'em in, and we keep 'em in. PHP Parody.
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. We are here again. This is our fourth segment with Dr. Jeremy Horpedal, Assistant Professor of Economics at the University of Central Arkansas and a scholar at the Arkansas Center for Research in Economics, and Mr. Jacob Bundrick, Policy Analyst with the Arkansas Center for Research in Economics. I want to talk about some of your reform ideas. They've been with us all hour, and so if you've missed it, you can get it on Facebook Live Archive. You can get it at the YouTube channel or at paulharrell.com. I want to talk to you guys about the solutions to Arkansas's out-of-control spending. That's my characterization, but I think your paper clearly defines that we have a problem that is unlike anybody else in the nation when it comes to our poverty and the levels that we've increased spending since 1951. Also, I want to note, feel free to comment about this. You guys also had another interval. You went from 1951 to 2013, but then you went from modern day, 1992 to 2013. And from 92 to 2013, Arkansas spending adjusted for inflation has increased 97%. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's adjusted for inflation and population. So per person in real terms, it's basically doubled over about 20 years.
And,
I think people know since 51 there's a lot more spending. Sure, things have changed, but not a lot's changed since the early 90s. But spending's about doubled per person in Arkansas since then.
Unbelievable. That alone says, hey, you conservatives who are running this government, or you that claim to be, it's time for actual reform, not just campaign rhetoric. So let's get to some of your reform ideas. Specifically, this to me would be the most important. I'd love to know, on page 36, quote, one improvement could be to include a feature similar to Colorado's Taxpayer Bill of Rights, in which tax revenue growth beyond inflation and population growth is refunded to taxpayers. I think you just mentioned this. Is this at least a way to curtail the spending problem in Arkansas? Do you guys support this idea?
Yeah, I think something like that. These are generally called tax and expenditure limits, and about half the states, a little more than half the states, have some version of this. Colorado's was just the strongest when it was passed. They essentially limit how much government spending can grow. The formula used in Colorado, and 5 other states do this too, is inflation plus population. So if you got 2% inflation, 1% population growth, that's 3%. That means government spending can only grow 3% that year. Mm. And if tax revenue grows more than that, it's refunded directly to the people. So it caps the growth in government spending, or actually it's government tax revenue that it caps in this case. Something like that, we think, would be a great addition to our Revenue Stabilization Act, which protects us from the downside of going bankrupt, but it also exposes us to the upside of big government.
Yeah.
And so this would, keep government within bounds. We're not going to go bankrupt, but we're also not going to have, this runaway growth we've had the past 20 years.
Yeah.
Most of the reforms we talk about are not about necessarily slashing spending now, but trying to keep it contained over the long run through changes in how we budget. So something like Colorado passed, they passed this in 1992. They've actually since weakened it, I would say mostly because it was doing its job.
Yeah.
And people didn't, the new regime in government didn't like that, so they kind of weakened it a little bit. But there are 5 states that still have a pretty strong restriction like this.
Yeah, taxpayer bill of rights. I like the idea of it. I think it's really, really good. And some more reform ideas. Let's talk about corporate welfare. We mentioned incentives earlier on page 35. Arkansas's economic development incentive programs should be eliminated. Now, this is like, to some people in government, that's like sky is falling, apocalypse level ideas. I completely agree. But I just want to commend you. This is a reform that needs to take place for sure, I think.
Yeah, I obviously we agree with it, that it should be ended. Look, there's a growing pile of research that demonstrates how ineffective these targeted economic development policies are, these tax breaks and subsidies for special businesses. They don't actually deliver the economic growth that's promised with them. So the obvious answer to us is to eliminate them. It's in some ways a waste of money. And we saw a little bit of that in the most recent session with InvestArc. So Senator Lance Eads and Representative Andy Davis did a good job eliminating InvestArc, which is one of our biggest incentives, and fixing the tax code that it was really a Band-Aid for. But at the same time, we also saw some growth in incentives. Obviously, the big one that comes to mind is the expansion of Amendment 82 bonds, which we touched on earlier. There was also another $50 million put towards the Quick Action Closing Fund. And then the legislature expanded the waste reduction and recycling tax credit. So on one hand, you had some good, but on the other hand, you had some bad. Our answer is overall comprehensive tax reform. And that's something that Jeremy touched on earlier with our project, Arkansas, the Roadmap to Tax Reform, where we give some ideas where the broad principle is to broaden the tax base, lower rates, and get rid of these special tax breaks and subsidies for individual businesses.
Yeah.
If you want to grow the economy and attract businesses here, we say don't do it with special targeted favors. Lower taxes for everyone. That's what will make them come. And Jacob has an entire book he wrote on this. Came out last summer. He was on your program talking about it. That's on our website too.
Jacob, real quick, you mentioned education earlier. You seem to be very knowledgeable about it. One of your reform ideas for the education spending crisis would be, quote, Arkansas should remove its arbitrary cap on the number of open enrollment charter schools. Again, that's not status quo, but, I mean, we need to change in status quo.
Right. And what we're really looking at here is a question of efficiency, right? So we've seen this big growth in education spending, but we haven't seen the increase in educational outcomes that we'd hope to see with that. So one thing that we like to look at is our neighbor Oklahoma. Their natural kind of comparison to us because they have similar poverty levels. But they have similar test scores to what we have, except they spend about $2,000 less per student than we do. So they're more efficient at it, right? And what we're getting at with increasing open enrollment charter schools or a voucher program is to increase competition. Because in the education marketplace, schools compete on quality. They don't necessarily compete on price like in the private market with Walmart and Amazon. They're competing on quality. So if you can incentivize schools to provide a better quality education, you're going to get more bang for your buck. You're going to get higher test scores all the way around. And we've seen a little bit of that here in Arkansas. So in 2015, the state did a charter school evaluation, and they found that open enrollment charter schools perform better in literacy and no worse in math than traditional public schools, but that the charter schools got about $1,000 per pupil less than the traditional public schools did.
Wow.
So in some ways,
doing better for less
you
money.
say that charter schools were more efficient at getting those educational outcomes than traditional public schools were.
Yeah. Gentlemen, we only have a minute left, and I just want to thank you so much, Dr. Jeremy Horpedahl and Mr. Jacob Bundrick. We appreciate you guys, and I'd love to do this again soon. And, you know, if there's anything that we didn't cover that you guys, want to come back on and talk about, you are welcome literally anytime. You're welcome on tomorrow if you want. So,
well, thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. We appreciate it.
Absolutely, guys. And again, the website is uca.edu/ACRE. Get a copy of this report. Arkansas is out. I mean, to me, I'm defining it. It's out of control spending, but it's a great report with the Mercatus Center at George Mason University, and really, really good stuff highlighting the history of really. It's a lesson in the growth of Arkansas government, because I believe you grow spending, you're growing government, you're increasing the responsibilities that the government really at this point is making for themselves. We got one more hour coming your way next.
Rush, Glenn, Sean, and Paul. This is Jonesboro's 1013 FM News Talk, KBTM.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
Everything else that they know, and try to come up with a reasonable evaluation. How is my guy doing?
Yes.
So, to answer that question, how's my guy doing?
And I think, the interesting part is, you have scorecards like yours, social issues. You have scorecards maybe like kind of for commerce, economic issues. And, you have people that are going to criticize that regardless. But the common theme going back to this idea that we have to check with the governor, I feel like there's a lot of crossover there. And I said on Friday that with that mentality of the legislature to not be as independent and to constantly check with the governor, some of their scores that they're upset with now that are affecting them personally, it might be because they're not being independent. They're not thinking for themselves and instead listening to the executive branch. So what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, and it's not just the governor. They have to check with House leadership, Senate leadership, maybe some lobbying group sometimes. But please understand, this is not true with all the people in the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of wonderful, independent-minded folks out there that are going to vote their convictions. And I thank God for them every single time that they do that. But it is disappointing when you see people that have good convictions, or at least you think they do, but they lose sight of that when they get out there and somebody in leadership tells them to do otherwise. And that's what's disappointing. And so, to me, Paul, the greatest threat to what we're trying to get done, which is to create a society in which life is honored and religious freedom flourishes and so forth and so on, and morality is honored. The greatest threat to that is not the ACLU or Planned Parenthood or the courts even, or the liberal media. It's people who campaign one way and tell you how conservative they are, and then when they get elected, they put on a jersey maybe for the other team. Or they just don't do much. They just kind of sit there and forget about all those campaign promises. This is one tool that people can use to see, did my lawmaker keep his promises?
Mm-hmm.
And if it helps people do that, then that serves everybody's best interest, I think.
We're talking with Jerry Cox. He's the president of the Family Council Action. And he came on last week to talk about the scorecard, and now there's been some fallout. We're talking about maybe the people that are criticizing. I really appreciate the conversation. The only person that I know of, Jerry, who has publicly criticized not just the Family Council, but the other scorecards that are out there, Senator Jim Hendren, who said on Twitter that he would like for groups like the Family Council to disclose their donors. And I'm not sure if he's doing that so he could maybe try to discredit your scorecard or discredit your organization. But what are your thoughts about the majority leader of the Senate, Jim Hendren, effectively saying, hey, private citizens should, be revealed in who they're supporting politically?
Well, that's bad. I mean, for anybody to say that would be a good idea, I think they need to stop and think. They are the government. They're an elected official. They're funded with tax dollars. They're spending our tax dollars. So they're the ones that are supposed to be transparent for all of us to look in and root around in their business, because it's our business. We're private. These other groups are private. And if the government thinks that it has a right to come over here to my organization and somehow force me to publish my donor list, then what's next? Are they going to go down to First Baptist Church that might distribute this report card and make them publish all the people that donate to First Baptist Church? And what business would that be of theirs in the first place? And would that change the way their vote is reported okay, so let's say I did publish my donor list. It doesn't change the report card one bit, not a bit, because their votes are the same whether I publish my list of donors or not. So I'm not sure what problem that would even begin to solve, and what's more, it's going to create a myriad of other issues about privacy.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's what Jim Hendren, what I'm about to say is what Jim Hendren meant, but to me, the only reason to have a donor list, or one of the big ones to have, is so that you could go after those donors in whatever form you can. I mean, and that's the thing we've all been concerned about with some of the so-called reforms that are out there, where they're trying to make anybody who's involved in the political process out here publish their donor list, and that has a chilling effect on participation and just all kinds of things. And so, we do still have a right to privacy in that regard, and I want to preserve it. And
the maintenance of a free society is a very difficult and complicated thing. And it requires a self-denying ordinance of the most extreme kind. It requires a willingness to put up with temporary evils on the basis of the subtle and sophisticated understanding that if you step in to do something about them, you not only may make them worse, but you will spread your tentacles and get bad results elsewhere.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. We lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
You're listening to the Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the program, hour number 2. My name is Paul. You found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We're building a liberty machine here. We need your help to do it. One of the ways you can help us out is to contribute to the program via phone call or text message. Can we take a moment? I just want to take a moment. I just got a text message from a listener, David. David writing, home run, great interview with the Arkansas Center for Research and Economics. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Can we take a moment? I just tweeted this out because I was just in between hours and thinking about new things. We talked about Arkansas's out-of-control spending problem and the home run report, the groundbreaking report confirming everything you've been hearing on this program from an independent source. Although there's going to be some in the Arkansas GOP establishment who are going to claim, "Oh no, they're gonna want to know if any conservatives." Have gained influence into the way Arkansas Center for for Research and Economics are thinking, because they're now putting out reports, not scorecards, but reports that are just really enlightening. But let's just take a moment and let's reflect on the fact that a conservative social organization that's been on the ground pounding the marble. And by the way, if you don't have comfortable shoes and you have to spend any time down at the Marble Palace, it can really seriously be painful over time. Let me say this. The first year I covered it, I didn't go back down there in those kind of shoes. I got some comfortable ones. But a conservative social organization like the Family Council, been down there for 30 years, back when the Democrats didn't want anything to do with social conservatism. They've been fighting for traditional American values. And we have, I just want to take a moment and reflect, we have members, not necessarily publicly, but we have members, some of them publicly on Twitter, criticizing the Family Council because they disagree with the scorecard the Family Council came out with. Just like they disagreed with the scorecard the American Conservative Union came out with. Just like they disagree with the scorecard that Conduit for Commerce came out with. Are you noticing a pattern here? You noticing a pattern? They just don't like people. They don't like independent groups that have a way that a certain worldview that score certain pieces of legislation and then just simply tell the people how they voted. They don't like it. But they really don't like the Family Council scorecard. And I'll tell you why they don't like the Family Council scorecard. You know why? Because they thought they've always got the low-hanging fruit issues to trick the voters. Well, I'm a social conservative, so I'm going to get elected on my social conservatism, and then I'm going to grow government. I'm going to increase welfare. I'm going to spend money we don't have. I'm going to get generational poverty and generational dependency on government secure, and we're going to make sure that it is always going to be alive and well. But I'm pro-life and I'm pro-gun. Hey, we know now that that's not even the case. If you look at how they really think of the Second Amendment is not how you think of the Second Amendment. An unalienable right, that's what you think. They think it's something that they can regulate. Governor Hutchinson didn't even call it a right. He called it a privilege. Do you remember that? Do you remember when Governor Asa Hutchinson called your Second Amendment right a privilege? Back to the Family Council. They always thought they had the low-hanging fruit. Social conservatism. And now they don't even have that. Now, is it just a coincidence that they're not conservative on fiscal policy, they're not conservative on smaller government, and they're not conservative on social issues? I mean, what Republican do we have left at that point? What kind of Republican do we have left? They're not happy with their scorecard with the Family Council. They're not happy with their scorecard with American Conservative Union. Some of them aren't happy with their scorecard from Americans for Prosperity. They're not happy with their scorecard for Conduit for Commerce. And now they're all complaining. And it's what's hilarious is now they are developing their own propaganda, government propaganda, to release a critique, from what I can tell, a critique of the scorecards. It's hilarious to me. These guys can't take an ounce of truth or even criticism because they can't handle somebody telling them, you're not who you say you are. Sorry. Well, you don't understand the process. You don't understand what it's like down there, and you don't understand what it's like being a senator or what it's like actually having to govern. By the way, if you go, and we're going to do this, Joe, make a note. I was supposed to do this today. You ready to make this note? Okay, we have audio of Senator Jim Hendren telling a bunch of conservatives that now we have an opportunity to make real change and do things. But when we were in the minority, we didn't really care. It didn't really matter what we did or what we passed because it wasn't going to pass, or what we voted for because it wasn't going to pass. So basically what he said was we could do whatever we wanted. We could sponsor whatever piece of legislation we wanted and get all the credibility from a show like this. Because what was I doing back then? Okay, well, I would say this is a great conservative idea, and it didn't pass, and it's the Democrats who are not voting for these things. We need to vote Democrats out of office. That's what I was doing. I was on the radio telling people who the Democrat Party was, who the Democrat Party is, based on what? Based on what? Their voting records. That's exactly right. How did Arkansas all of a sudden switch from a Democrat state to a Republican state? Because there were places like this program, mediums like this, that were telling you how the Democrats were voting. Yeah, they're your Sunday school teacher. Yeah, they're a really nice person. Yeah, they're congenial. Yeah, you may go to school with their son or their daughter, but their voting record was enabling the policies of Washington, D.C. Fast forward, now the Republicans have control. We're doing the same thing. We're telling about your voting records, and you can't handle it. You can't handle it because the facade is caving in. Because it's not just, well, we differ on the private option. Well, we differ on Obamacare. We need to take lemons and make lemonade. Okay, we differ on that, all right? I say that, you're trying to make a feces sandwich into something that's edible. I don't think you can. Okay, we differ on that, but we're united on these other things. But actually, we're not, because you don't even have a good social conservative score. We should have known when Asa caved on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. You want to know how I know? I freaked out that day. You go back and listen to the broadcast back in 2015 when Asa, at the end of the session, bailed on the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and I said to myself, wow, I know Asa has continued Obamacare. I know he's renaming it Arkansas Works. I know he's playing politics. I know he can't end the welfare program. I know he's not a real conservative in these issues, but I thought we were united on the social conservatives. I thought we were united on the social issues, but apparently we weren't, because as soon as Walmart called, oh, you know what, religious freedom and the First Amendment isn't that important. No, I don't want the audio, Joe. So I want you to make a note to find the audio. And thank you for telling me that. Where I was going on that was, I have the audio of Jim Hendren saying that. He sounds just like Mitch McConnell. Did you hear? This is the audio we have to go get. Did you hear Mitch McConnell? Did you hear Mitch McConnell talk about how it doesn't really matter what it was like when we didn't have the majority in the Senate? We could do whatever we wanted, but now that we're the majority, we have to actually be careful with what we pass. It's literally verbatim what Jim Hendren said in 2015 to a group of conservatives that were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Most of them were. I wasn't, because I was reading his bill, and I was like, yeah, no, this isn't right. His bill actually was continuing Obamacare, even though he was claiming it was going to end it here in Arkansas. The private option Arkansas Works or whatever. Of course, we now know that's not true. But there's a lot of conservatives that were giving the benefit of the doubt. There was a reason that the majority leader of the Senate, Senator Jim Hendren, goes to new affiliate areas that we're getting, like Russellville and the Tri-County Tea Party, and puts pictures of my face up on his PowerPoint. That's right. Yours truly was a part of Senator Jim Hendren's PowerPoint trying to counter this conservative message that you are hearing right now. He went around to groups trying to tell them, don't listen to this guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He's calling our task force a task farce. That was the actual photo of me in his slideshow. He doesn't, the whiteboard. Our whiteboard said task farce. That was when we first came up, because we knew what it is. It is a farce. The Senate Majority Leader goes across Arkansas trying to combat this message. That's how much of a threat they think you are. Not me. They think you are a threat, because if you have the truth, you're going to make better choices. And you have not just Conduit for this is not just about Conduit for Commerce and their scorecard. They're now attacking Family Council. They're now upset about Family Council and their scorecard. And they're two different issues. Two completely different issues. One is about social conservatives and the things that are important to Jerry Cox and his organization that's been fighting the good fight for 30 years. And the other is Conduit for Commerce and the conduit organizations that are fighting for limited government, less dependency on government, and fiscal responsibility, and small business. And treating all businesses equally, and people that don't actually want anything from the government. First, they came for the fiscal conservatives, but now they're coming for the social conservatives? What's going on here? What kind of Republican Party is this? The phony conservative facade for people in leadership in the Arkansas Republican Party is crumbling before your eyes. They're breaking the fourth wall. Some of these scorecards, it's not even the scorecards, it's their reaction to them. You're breaking the fourth wall. All of a sudden, people realize, oh, I'm watching a play. Oh, I'm watching a performance. The proscenium is materializing. The telephone number, if you want to call us or text, is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. I'm tweeting this right now. I'm retweeting. Take a moment and reflect on the Arkansas GOP elected leadership criticizing Family Council. First, they came for fiscal conservatives, then social. I'm retweeting myself with the caption, "The phony conservative facade is crumbling." Hashtag ARLeg, hashtag ARPX. Follow me on Twitter, especially if you don't have an account. We need more conservatives on Twitter. There's a lot of leftists out there, really, 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 really big militant leftists who are creating this unrealistic bubble with the hashtags ARLeg and ARPX. At Paul Harrell 1776. That's at PAULHARRELL 1776. I'm hitting tweet, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Protecting your business means protecting your data. But is your business really prepared to handle the growing threat of things like cybercriminals and ransomware? At iTex, they're committed to deploying the best security solutions to protect your business and your bottom line. Security threats are constantly evolving. So are security needs. Be proactive now and equip your business with the best cybersecurity available with iTex. Call them today for a free consultation at 870-336-9778. That's 870-336-9778 or itexusa.com.
This is State Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. I want the truth of our economic condition to be known and debated. I'm not out to fool people into voting against their own interests. We need to trust people and then give them credit for understanding policies that promote freedom and free markets. We need to remind our constituents of the underpinning principles of our nation's founding document: freedom of worship, freedom to speak up, freedom to assemble, freedom to petition the government, and freedom to report issues.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas.
Arkansas small businesses are tired of taxes that are too high and regulations that work as obstacles to small business success. If you own a small business, it's time to take action. Now, I'm not talking about the local chambers of commerce. I'm talking about an organization that's actually run by small business owners and are fighting for small businesses right here in the state of Arkansas. They're called Conduit for Action, and they're on your side. Conduit for Action is here not to get something from the government, but to be left alone by the government. Think of them as your personal advocate for limited government at the Capitol in Little Rock. If you're tired of all the politicians talking with no results and ready for action, start outsourcing your government affair needs with Conduit for Action. Go now to conduitforaction.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforaction.org, and stand up for small business in Arkansas.
Do you need to advertise your business product or service, but not sure what the best choice is? Folks, allow me to introduce you to Talk Radio. You're listening to it right now. Talk radio is one of the most unique mediums in all of advertising because it actually works. It gets the information you want to the people you want to get it to. And by the way, those people are educated, well-informed decision makers of their household, and most of them have disposable income. If this is a target audience for your business, then you have to consider advertising on my show, The Paul Harrell Program. We have options for most any budget and can provide you with exciting opportunities to grow your business. We can put your message across the state, or we can help you locally. Call 870-275-9755 if you have any questions. That's 870-275-9755, or visit my website, paulharrell.com, and click on Advertise.
Watch Paul live at paulharrell.com. It's free and available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because the Liberty Machine never sleeps.
Now we've got to find a way to we got to get that Mitch McConnell audio. I heard it in a news report. I tried to search for it just with not very much diligence after the show yesterday, but I forgot all about it until now. But we always keep this audio pretty handy.
Now, when we were in the minority party for a long time, it really didn't matter what we filed that did any significant change because it wasn't going to pass.
So this is Senator Jim Hendren from 2015 trying to assuage the fears to convince the conservatives at the basement of the Capitol. This was at the Marble Palace in the basement of the Capitol in the cafeteria, trying to convince them that we should trust him and that his plan to end the private option would happen, that it would end Medicaid expansion, and it did not. His uncle, the governor, along with the help of his bill, to, quote, end the program. It never ended. They set up a task force to keep the program. So we always keep this audio on handy, but this is just what Mitch McConnell sounds like today now that the Republicans take control of the Senate.
When we were in the minority party for a long time, it really didn't matter what we filed that did any significant change because it wasn't going to pass. It's a different situation down here today, and we have the opportunity to make real change and to pass legislation and do things. We also have an opportunity to screw it completely up and get the blame for it.
This is me giving you the blame for it. That's what that music is. Congratulations.
Here's what the bill says. I'm not going to go through all this. I'm just going to tell you each one of these cases that I put up there is where it says it ends Medicaid expansion.
This is from his slideshow at the Tri-County Tea Party in Russellville, where he put my face up there, and I was there. I was in the audience. Imagine how awkward that was. It was. And you know what? Me and Senator Hendren, I mean, we were congenial, and just clearly we have agreements. I assume we agree to disagree. Maybe we don't now.
It ends it. And there's a lot of people saying, well, it would have ended anyway.
This is flashback.
Here's what the bill says. I'm not going to go through all this.
This is crazy.
I'm just going to tell you each one of these cases that I put up there is where it says it ends Medicaid expansion.
Nope.
It ends it. And there's a lot of people saying, well, it would have ended anyway. It would have, the private option would have ended, Medicaid expansion would not. All we would have done is gone from private insurance policies back to Medicaid expansion. It was the law that directed them to change the state plan to expand Medicaid, and unless that law is changed, it will stay expanded.
Arkansas works.
If Senate Bill 96 had not passed, Medicaid expansion would be continuing with or without the private option after December 31, 2016. That's the cold, hard facts, but that's not what people like to say.
No, what people like to say was, I had no plans to rehash this. This is just my own pontificating. The cold hard truth was this bill was sold that you guys were ending the private option Medicaid expansion. That's what this bill was sold as. And you didn't. So, thanks but no thanks. And this is why nobody trusts the GOP leadership anymore. This is why nobody trusts, or a lot of people don't trust. I mean, some people are still go along to get along, but you can't trust. I mean, there were people with so much faith in Senator Hendren and his at the time voting record and his conservative credentials. Not anymore. Yet he is still being used as nephew number one to really represent the executive branch of government, not the legislative one.
And that's what the bill says. But there's confusion, and I will give you, in defense of people who freak out, I can see why there's some confusion based on some of the headlines.
When we were in the minority party for a long time, it really didn't matter what we filed that did any significant change because it wasn't going to pass. It's a different situation down here today, and we have the opportunity to make real change and to pass legislation and do things. We also have an opportunity to screw it completely up and get the blame for it.
I mean, can we take a moment? This was in 2015, and you know what? There were people that were still hopeful. I was one of them. Even at this point, I was thinking, man, I really, really want to quit talking about Medicaid expansion and Obamacare in Arkansas. I really hope the next session in 2017, we can really accomplish conservative things. You know what they did instead? And this is when it's no longer coincidence. It's this: you guys are leftists. You guys are progressives. I'll rephrase that. You guys are progressive Republicans. You tried to raise our taxes. You hypocritically said we got to eliminate the exemptions. We got to eliminate all these exemptions in our tax code, while forcing people to vote for a military tax exemption for retirees that raise taxes on other Arkansans in order to pay for it. And I say forced because that's exactly the term to use. Because who wants to vote against people who've sacrificed so much? Right? They pitted two principles against one another, not raising taxes and supporting the troops. Pretty shameless. Who is this GOP? Who is this? That's who they are. Just think of this music. Don't take them seriously. They take themselves way too seriously. I forgot about the key change. Running around the Marble Palace, hoping to get absorbed into the marble walls to get a government job. This is who they are, folks. We got to take a break. Thanks so much for being with us. We're going to get to Donald Trump's press conference in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Paul Harrell, weekdays from 4 to 6. Learn more at paulharrell.com.
And again, I could publish my donor list all day long, and it would not change the content of that report because the votes are what they are.
Yeah. Yeah, and on that, just real quick, nationally, there's way more examples of this, of what and I know Jim Hendren is a Republican, but on the left, I mean, you look at like somebody like the Mozilla CEO, who had to resign because they found out, he was donating to groups that the left thought he shouldn't be donating to, and then he loses his job. I mean, you can go on and on about when people find out what is private information, how your career is over. You're done for, and it may not be that extreme in Arkansas, but it could be, and that's why it's a First Amendment issue. It's a freedom of association issue.
Yeah, it's like when they were trying to get the concealed carry list when it was published, and some stuff like that. It just it's an invasion of people's privacy. So here's the bottom line for us with this report card. I'm glad we did it. I hope people find it to be a useful tool that they can put in their toolbox with the other things they use to evaluate their lawmakers. And, if people say, why did you put those issues on there? They were all the issues that we worked on during the legislative session. So we thought that was important. And were there other issues that were important? You bet. Were there other issues I cared about personally? Of course. But we didn't put those in there because guess what? We didn't work on them. And so that's how we came to where we were on this. Yeah. And so we're going to give Statesman Awards to 16 members of the General Assembly, 8 senators, 8 House members. And we've ordered the awards. I have about 6,000 of these report cards that I'm, to use a good Arkansas term, that I'm fixing to mail out to the people on our list. But it is available online at arkansasreport.com, and people can read it and draw whatever conclusions they choose.
All right. arkansasreport.com. Jerry Cox, the president of the Family Council Action Committee. We appreciate it, sir. It's always a pleasure.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Okay. All right, folks. Again, if you want to get that report card, Family Council report card, the website, arkansasreport.com. Back in just a moment.
puts the Paul in politics. The Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media.
So I think that we need to listen to the President of the United States' his full press conference yesterday, the entire thing. I've planned this for this segment because I've talked to a lot of people who you would think, or who are conservative-minded, who have been listening to the media, and they're saying, look, can you believe President Trump and that sort of thing? What is he saying? What is he doing? Da, 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 da. And the media is completely misrepresenting. And I will admit part of that part of that is because Trump tends to talk generally, and then he gets more specific and generally. And, of course, they want to take some of these general statements, and they want to say Trump is saying there are good people, that the neo-Nazis are good. Trump never said the neo-Nazis were good in Charlottesville. He never said that. He said there were people there that were not white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And there were also people who were, in the Antifa group that were not bad as well. But he's saying that there are people in the Antifa group with bats. They're obviously the white supremacists are bad, abhorrent. He's condemned them. But look, I'm going to shut up now. I want you to listen to this press conference. It was supposed to be about infrastructure. Listen to how many times the press interrupts him. I'm not going to say anything until the end of the press conference, okay? But listen to this. Donald Trump yesterday. You've got to listen to the entire thing to get the context. Take a listen.
Why did you wait so long?
I didn't wait long. I didn't wait long. I wanted to make sure, unlike most politicians, that what I said was correct, not make a quick statement. The statement I made on Saturday, the first statement, was a fine statement. But you don't make statements that direct unless you know the fact. It takes a little while to get the facts. You still don't know the facts. And it's a very, very important process to me. And it's a very important statement. So I don't want to go quickly and just make a statement for the sake of making a political statement. I want to know the facts. If you go back to in fact, I brought it.
Who did you bring?
As I said remember this, Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And then I went on from there. Now, here's the thing. Excuse me. Take it nice and easy. Here's the thing. When I make a statement, I like to be correct. I want the facts. This event just happened. In fact, a lot of the event didn't even happen yet as we were speaking. This event just happened. Before I make a statement, I need the facts. So I don't want to rush into a statement. So making the statement when I made it was excellent. In fact, the young woman, who I hear is a fantastic young woman, and it was on NBC, her mother wrote me and said, through, I guess, Twitter, social media, the nicest things, and I very much appreciated that. I hear she was a fine, really actually an incredible young woman, but her mother on Twitter thanked me for what I said. And honestly, if the press were not fake, and if it was honest, the press would have said what I said was very nice. But unlike you and unlike the media, before I make a statement, I like to know the facts. They don't. Listen, how about a couple of infrastructure questions?
Was that terrorism?
Say it. What?
The CEO of Walmart said you missed a critical opportunity to help bring the country together. Did you?
Not at all. I think the country. Look, you take a look. I've created over 1 million jobs since I'm president. The country is booming. The stock market is setting records. We have the highest employment numbers we've ever had in the history of our country. We're doing record business. We have the highest levels of enthusiasm. So the head of Walmart, who I know, who's a very nice guy, was making a political statement. I mean, ask him how he's doing. I do it the same way. And you know why? Because I want to make sure, when I make a statement, that the statement is correct. And there was no way of making a correct statement that early. I had to see the facts, unlike a lot of reporters.
Nazis were there.
I didn't know David Duke was there. I wanted to see the facts. And the facts, as they started coming out, were very well stated. In fact, everybody said his statement was beautiful. If he would have made it sooner, that would have been good. I couldn't have made it sooner because I didn't know all of the facts. Frankly, people still don't know all of the facts. It was very important to me, excuse me. It was very important to me to get the facts out and correctly. Because if I would have made a fast statement, and the first statement was made without knowing much other than what we were seeing. The second statement was made after, with knowledge, with great knowledge. There's still things, there's still things that people don't know. I want to make a statement with knowledge. I wanted to know the facts. Okay.
Two questions. Was this terrorism? And can you tell us how you're feeling about your chief strategist?
Well, I think the driver of the car is a disgrace to himself, his family, and this country. And that is, you can call it terrorism. You can call it murder. You can call it whatever you want. I would just call it as the fastest one to come up with a good verdict. That's what I'd call it. Because there is a question. Is it murder? Is it terrorism? And then you get into legal semantics. The driver of the car is a murderer. And what he did was a horrible, horrible, inexcusable thing.
Can you tell us how you're feeling about your chief strategist, Mr. Bannon? Can you talk about that?
I would echo Maggie's question. Steve Bannon is...
I never spoke to Mr. Bannon about it.
Tell us broadly what your... Do you still have confidence in Steve?
Well, we'll see. And look, I like Mr. Bannon. He's a friend of mine. But Mr. Bannon came on very late. You know that. I went through 17 senators, governors, and I won all the primaries. Mr. Bannon came on very much later than that. And I like him. He's a good man. He is not a racist. I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually gets a very unfair press in that regard. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Bannon. But he's a good person, and I think the press treats him, frankly, very unfairly.
Do you have confidence that Senator McCain has called on you to defend your National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, against some of these attacks?
I did it the last time.
And he called on it again, linking this
Senator
to
McCain?
The alt-right. And
Senator McCain, you mean the one who voted against Obamacare?
And he said...
Who is Senator? You mean Senator McCain who voted against us getting good health care?
McCain said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group to those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about. But when you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go.
Senator McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain's
let me ask you this. What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. I'm not finished, fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more closely than you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. And nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now. You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same as neo-Nazis?
Those people, all of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis, believe me. Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me, and you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week, and is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know, you really do have to ask yourself, where does it stop? But they were there to protest, excuse me, you take a look the night before, they were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. Infrastructure question. Go ahead.
Should statues of Robert E. Lee stay up?
I would say that's up to a local town, community, or the federal government, depending on where it is located.
Are you against the Confederacy? How concerned are you about race relations in America? And do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office?
I think they've gotten better or the same. Look, they've been frayed for a long time, and you can ask President Obama about that because he'd make speeches about it. But I believe that the fact that I brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs. You see where companies are moving back into our country. I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. We have companies coming back into our country. We have 2 car companies that just announced. We have Foxconn in Wisconsin just announced. We have many companies, I say, pouring back into the country. I think that's going to have a huge positive impact on race relations. You know why? It's jobs. What people want now, they want jobs. They want great jobs with good pay. And when they have that, you watch how race relations will be. And I'll tell you, we're spending a lot of money on the inner cities. We're fixing the inner cities. We're doing far more than anybody's done with respect to the inner cities. It's a priority for me, and it's very important.
Mr. President, are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane?
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is another side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
Both sides, sir? You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame. Yes, I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They
showed up in Charlottesville
to protest.
Excuse me, they didn't put themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
The press treated unfairly, sir. I'm sorry, I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly?
No,
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that rally, and I looked the night before. If you look, there were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this, there are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country. Does anybody have a final? Does anybody have? You have an infrastructure.
What makes you think you can get an infrastructure bill? You didn't get health care.
Well, I'll tell you, we came very close with health care. Unfortunately, John McCain.
So that is the press conference there, and I wanted to play it from start to finish so you get the full context. Of course, the media is saying, people on social media are saying, okay, Donald Trump said that there are good white supremacists and good neo-Nazis. If you take the full context of what was said there, that's not what he said at all. Now, you can still disagree with how he conducted the press conference if you want. I personally find it refreshing. Matter of fact, I listened to that last night. I woke up this morning. You know what I thought? Because the mainstream media, the jig is up. Everybody knows the mainstream media lies. I thought to myself, it's going to be painful, but Donald Trump just might end this current obsession with political correctness and dancing to the it's like the media expects. It's like the media is a DJ, and Donald Trump just refuses to dance to the beat that they are putting out, and it drives him nuts. And every time he has a situation like this, and exposes the media for what they are, it eventually turns out to be a net positive. Notice no mention on the nightly news of Guam and North Korea blinking and backing down. They went wall to wall with that. And, of course, basically saying Donald Trump is a racist. I mean, that's the whole point. They're trying to, Donald Trump is a racist. Donald Trump is a bigot and that sort of thing. And to me, and by the way, I'm assuming that Donald Trump is correct. I'm assuming that he's correct when he says that not all the people who were there protesting Robert E. Lee were neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and white nationalists. I'm assuming that that's correct. I don't think it's a stretch to imagine it's the case, but the reason I'm assuming it's correct is because he's the president of the United States, and I'm assuming the briefings and the intelligence and stuff that he has is more. I mean, especially when you take the fact the media is not going to report it. That's number one. Number two, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm not a white nationalist. I'm not a neo-Nazi. And I was against them separating Robert E. Lee and Martin Luther King Jr. on the same day here in Arkansas. I was against it. I didn't think it was a good idea. Number one, because it's a part of the exact same thing that you're witnessing now. It's a part of this attempt to sanitize history, to right a wrong or reconcile something that's never going to be appeased. It's never going to be satisfied. It's actually very disturbing when you try to get rid of history because then you'll fail to have learned from it, like this country has demonstrated it has. You say, Paul, well, Charlottesville full of white supremacists. No, I mean, the country's not full of white supremacists. The country's not full of neo-Nazis. We don't need, as much as sometimes I like Jimmy Fallon's comedy, I don't need to hear from Jimmy Fallon and to say things like, we're never going to go back. We don't ever need to go back or something like this. Of course not. This goes back to my monologue from yesterday. Get off your high horse. Racism being wrong is the baseline of normal in this country. Let me say it again. Racism being wrong. I know people want to say, well, I grew up in the South and you're wrong, and that's not true. Racism's everywhere. In reality, most of the time, people are treated based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. There still is racism. There still is bigotry. But most of the time, that's not what's going on in this country now. And so it's just the media is manipulating people. They are in panic mode right now. That's really what this is. They are in sheer panic mode. And because they don't know what to do. They have been exposed. The only thing they know to do is double down. They were exposed on election night for being complete frauds. And, it's continuing. And that's not to say that I agree with every Donald Trump policy, because the fact is that I don't. I'm a limited government constitutional conservative, and some of the ideas that are more nationalist populist are not ideas that I get on board with. I'm really worried about the infrastructure plan, for example. I think that may spend money we don't have. All that being said, folks, he refuses to dance to the media's beat. And this whole situation in Charlottesville is absolutely tragic. Absolutely tragic. And the mainstream media is trying to get you to believe that a billionaire real estate mogul from New York City is a David Duke white supremacist, is a neo-Nazi. Does anyone really believe that? And I just don't think. I think that when you look at it from that concept, that's kind of very strange to me, anyway. I think it's strange to a lot of you out there as well. At the same time, what did he want to do? He wanted to wait and get the facts, right? Remember when Barack Obama said the Cambridge police acted stupidly and then they didn't? That's what happens when you believe the media immediately. They're not the arbiters of truth. Have you noticed that the media is actually now no longer reporting on events, but they're reporting on what popular people have to say about those events? Have you noticed that, Joe? Yeah, I know we have to go to break, but they're no longer just reporting the events and letting you make up your mind about what happened or how you feel about what happened because they're reporting what happened. No, instead, they now report on what other people say what happened. And then anyway, that's pretty frustrating to me. We got to take a break. Back in just a moment.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody. If you would like information about advertising or supporting the Paul Harrell Program and Conduit Media Group, call 870-275-9755. Join the fight against big government and advance the preservation of liberty by calling 870-275-9755. The Paul Harrell Program, brought to you by Conduit Media Group.
Let's see, Heather in Craighead County, preach. Well, hey, I'm not preaching. I'm just. Joe says I'm preaching to the choir. Then we got Mike texting in. Okay, that was a great parody. Thanks for the Trump press conference. Mike, we appreciate you texting. Yeah, I'm glad that we have some people in our audience that thought that the Trump press conference, we played the whole thing, because you just listen to that. I mean, come on. And maybe it's too tempting. I mean, maybe these people are so devoid of character they just can't stand to not report on the totality of what he said, but only only the snippets. And that's still going to happen. Maybe it's just, at this point it's unavoidable. That last PHP parody was our needy politician. That's actually not a new one. So, We've had that one for a while, but still people thinking that it's really, really good. I mean, it's satire supposed to have some truth in it. That's what we aim to do with our parodies. If you have any PHP parody ideas, you can text me, 870-275-9799. We've got some more in the works. You're going to like it, as always. And we're going to have some really exciting news about ways that you can support the show for extra content in the coming weeks. Don't forget about that. In the meantime, buy our Liberty Machine t-shirts at paulharrell.com. That's Paul, HARRELL.com. Click on store, building a Liberty Machine. We need your help. And that'll do it for today. For our Mountain Talk 97 audience, KJMT, you guys have one more hour of the PHP coming your way next. For the rest of you, Arkansas, thanks for listening. Be safe.